Donna lived with her husband, Walter, who had become more and more controlling even though he didn't work. Walter stayed at home and handled the housework, while Donna worked to support them financially. Their arrangement was supposed to provide stability, but Walter's controlling behavior made Donna feel like her efforts didn't matter. One day, Walter, with a smug look on his face, announced that he was going to let his parents move into their house and suggested that Donna could live with her in-laws without even asking her opinion. Donna was shocked and speechless at his audacity, especially since she owned the house. This moment was a breaking point for her. She had tolerated Walter's overbearing attitude for too long. Walter often gave orders as if he had the right to do so. Once he even demanded that Donna get him ice cream late at night while he relaxed, even though she was exhausted from work. When Donna suggested he could get it himself, Walter laughed and hinted that upsetting him could lead to consequences. His behavior wasn't just frustrating, it was exhausting. Donna felt increasingly disrespected and unappreciated, and she began to question whether she could continue living with someone who acted superior just because he was the husband. She realized that if things didn't change, she couldn't go on like this. Walter needed to understand how his actions were affecting her, and Donna decided it was time for him to face the consequences of his behavior. At that moment, I realized that dealing with Walter on top of my already stressful job would push my stress levels to the limit. So I told him, "I'm really tired. I'm sorry, I'm going to rest in my room." Walter didn't like my response and blocked my way, challenging me, "Wait, what's with that attitude towards your husband? I could kick you out right now if I wanted to. Do you think it's okay to upset your spouse like that?" He looked furious. I couldn't believe how he could act so authoritative without contributing financially and how easily he could upset me, yet he couldn't handle even the slightest inconvenience himself. It was like dealing with a child's tantrum. "I'm sorry, but I'm exhausted. Please, just try to understand," I replied, forcing a smile, no longer wanting to argue. Walter sighed deeply and muttered, "You're such a disappointment as a wife." I didn't have the energy to argue, so I simply repeated, "I'm sorry," and retreated to my room. Day by day, Walter's overbearing behavior wore me down, but I was too exhausted to confront him. Then one day I caught a severe cold, which the doctor said was caused by stress. I was so sick that I couldn't move, so I took a day off from work and could only lie in bed. When I told Walter about my condition, he snapped, "A cold? That's just an excuse. Go to work. You're useless." His harsh words seemed to make my fever worse. He declared, "I won't be taking care of you. This is your mess, deal with it." So I was left alone in my room, moaning from the fever, with no one to help. I was too weak to prepare anything for myself and didn't want to face Walter again for fear of more verbal abuse. My temperature reached 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and the fever was so intense that my body was drenched in sweat. I couldn't even get up to change my soaked clothes. I lay there, thinking about how much easier things might be if I could just pass away. With these grim thoughts, I endured a painful night alone. Maybe it was the fever talking, but deep down, I knew something had to change. Throughout the night, as the sun disappeared and the stars took over the sky, a deep sense of loneliness and doubt overwhelmed me. I longed for Walter's support, not even to cure my fever, but just to bring me an ice pack, apply a cool compress, and ask if I was okay. Sadly, this was just a fantasy. Instead, the words I received from him were harsh and uncaring, cutting deep and stirring up new anxieties. I questioned why I was the only one suffering, wondering what I had done wrong and why things couldn't be smoother between us. Once these thoughts started, I couldn't hold back the tears. The pain was just too much. After 5 days of rest, my fever finally subsided enough for me to return to work. My colleagues and bosses expressed their concern, asking if I was truly okay to be back. Although I was still recovering, I felt I had to support our household financially and couldn't afford more time off. Their genuine concern touched me deeply, such a stark contrast to Walter's indifference, and it nearly brought me to tears again. At this point, a voice inside me screamed that I couldn't continue dealing with Walter's behavior. I was pushing myself too hard, ignoring the signs that this way of life was unsustainable. Deep down, I knew I couldn't keep going like this without eventually collapsing from the strain. By now, my feelings for Walter had significantly faded, yet I didn't have the energy to think about separation. Amid these overwhelming emotions, I dragged myself through my days, working hard, returning home exhausted, and catering to Walter's unpredictable demands. This had become my daily routine. Then one day, while I was trying to find a moment of peace in my room, Walter called out, wanting to discuss something serious. It had been a long time since we had a real conversation. Typically, Walter would make big decisions on his own. With a heavy heart, I sat down for the discussion, fearing what might come next. To my shock, Walter, with unexpected enthusiasm, announced, "I'm going to let my parents live in this house. You can't even cook, so you need to leave." The first word that slipped out of my mouth was, "What?" He continued, "You need to leave because you're going to live with my in-laws." I was stunned, unable to believe his selfish demands. The situation had reached a breaking point, and I realized something had to change. As Walter continued, he revealed his plans to change the ownership of our house, transferring it to his name and his parents. He bluntly stated his intentions to divorce me and start a new life, declaring that his decision was final and that my opinion didn't matter. I felt utterly disregarded, my feelings trampled under decisions made without my consent. Walter, puffed up with his man-of-the-house ego, seemed only concerned with his own desires. My heart sank as I realized the impossibility of continuing life with him. Ignoring my growing detachment, Walter sneered, "You love me so much, don't you? I know this is shocking coming from a husband you love so dearly, but I'm sorry. I just want to take care of my family. Please understand." His words, meant to sound considerate, felt more like a scolding. I wanted to shout that he was wrong. Any affection I once felt for Walter had vanished, leaving only disbelief at his selfishness and regret for not ending things sooner. Why hadn't I left him earlier? If I had, maybe he wouldn't have had the chance to exploit and demean me so thoroughly. I even resented my past self for being too lenient with him. Seeing my visible distress, Walter misinterpreted my pain as lingering love, thinking I couldn't bear the thought of a divorce. But he was mistaken. My feelings for him had long since faded into nothing more than disdain for a man who wrongly believed I still cared. Determined to set things straight, I said firmly, "Fine, then I'll leave." Walter gasped, "What?" He hadn't anticipated my readiness to accept the divorce and move on. He needed to understand that the old me who always bailed him out was gone for good. From now on, whatever happened to Walter, he would face it without me because our relationship was over. Seeing my resolve, Walter stood shocked and frozen. I seized the moment to head to my room and pack the essentials. I knew I couldn't take the larger items today and would need to arrange for movers later. As I began to pack, Walter hurried over, perhaps finally realizing the seriousness of the situation. His voice tinged with uncertainty, he asked, "Are you sure about this? If we divorce, we'll be strangers." I smiled softly and replied, "I've already fallen out of love with you. Letting go feels like a weight has been lifted off my shoulders." Hearing this, Walter stood there looking bewildered and lost. I nodded, thanked him for the years we had together, and walked out of the house. His worried expression lingered in my mind as I returned to my parents' home. When I explained everything to my parents, they were initially furious about Walter's behavior, but soon calmed down, reassured by my resolve and the plan I had in place. I began to recover at my parents' home, taking the first steps by initiating the divorce proceedings. After I sent the divorce papers, Walter messaged me, "Are you sure about this? I don't know if it's really a good thing, but I don't have any feelings for you anymore. If we've gone this far, there's no turning back." His message ended with a request to speed up the divorce. "I feel so much better now that you're gone, so fill out the divorce papers quickly," I replied, but received no response. A few days later, I received the completed divorce papers from Walter, with his sections already filled out. I'd promptly completed my part and submitted it to the county office. Now, Walter and I were officially divorced. During the divorce, we divided our assets. Walter received the house, as he had insisted, so I transferred ownership to him and chose to move on. The house had never really felt like home to me. It was more of a burden. Instead, I sought alimony from Walter, which his parents initially covered since he wasn't working. However, he was now job hunting, likely planning to repay them once he secured employment. But, as often happens, reality doesn't always align with plans. A month after the divorce was finalized, I had moved out of my parents' home and into a new place, enjoying a more peaceful life. Then I received a call from Walter. Honestly, it was annoying. I could guess why he was calling, but ignoring him might lead to more complications, so knowing I'd have to address it sooner or later for the sake of my future, I answered the phone with a firm, "Hello, what do you want?" Completely fed up, I wanted him to get straight to the point. Reluctantly, I listened as he pleaded, "Please help me." His desperate tone made me chuckle. Walter was clearly in a tough spot, and while part of me felt distant, another part was mildly amused by the irony of his desperation. Walter's call caught me off guard. I hadn't expected things to have deteriorated so quickly. "Well, what's going on? You need to tell me the whole story." I replied, half amused by the situation, suspecting why Walter might be struggling but wanting him to lay it all out himself. With a hesitant voice, stumbling over his words, Walter began to explain. He had taken over the house after our divorce and managed it fine for a month. However, he now faced a rent payment he couldn't meet due to his unemployment. Desperate, he had asked my former in-laws, who were on a pension, for help, but the rent was much steeper than anyone anticipated, about $2,500, a sum they couldn't afford on their fixed income. My former in-laws were livid, accusing him of misleading them. "This isn't what we agreed to," they insisted, placing the blame squarely on Walter. Feeling lost and unsure, Walter called me, nearly in tears. I didn't realize the rent would be so high. The place is a mess now. What are you going to do about it? Frustrated and overwhelmed, Walter was now trying to pin the blame on me. Admittedly, I hadn't discussed the specifics of the rent before our separation, but it was Walter's folly to assume responsibility for the house without understanding the financial commitments involved. He had pushed me away, treating me like an outsider, and now he was facing the consequences of his decisions. Despite this, he seemed unable to accept responsibility and reached out to me for help. I couldn't help but sigh at his audacity. Ignoring the strain in his voice, Walter continued urgently, "Please, I need your help. We can't keep going like this. I need you." His desperation was palpable. The rent due date had likely already passed, which meant they might be behind on payments. The landlord of that house had a reputation for being temperamental and strict about rent deadlines. I remember being warned repeatedly when I was still living there, never be late with the rent. If they missed a payment, they would face serious repercussions. Walter, having met the landlord a few times, knew exactly how intimidating they could be. His call was a last-ditch effort driven by sheer desperation. When Walter called me, pleading for help, he said, "Please just cover the rent for 1 month. I don't have anyone else to turn to. You still care about me, right? If someone you care about is in trouble, you should help them out." His tone was still self-centered, as if he hadn't changed at all. I wanted to tell him straight that my feelings for him had long since faded, but instead, I held back and replied coldly, "I'm sorry, but I don't have any obligation to help you. You were the one who cut me off, and now you expect me to assist you when it's convenient for you. That's not fair." Walter tried to defend himself. "Please don't be so cold. I really can't handle this alone. Whether you still love me or not doesn't matter now. We were married once, right? Can't you help me out just this once?" "No, you were the one who left me. Even before that, my feelings for you had already cooled. It's been a long time since I stopped loving you," I responded firmly. Hearing Walter's dejected voice on the other end, he said, "I can't believe it," which struck a chord deep within me. For so long I had endured everything, even when Walter was selfish, took me for granted or mistreated me, especially when I was sick. I stayed by his side, hoping to salvage our marriage. I worked tirelessly for the life we had, but this was the outcome. Why hadn't I left sooner when my love for him faded? Why didn't I distance myself earlier? These regrets flooded in, mingling with the anger I felt toward him. Walter never truly faced me, never showed real concern, never protected me, and never embraced the idea of navigating life together as a team. All this time, he treated me like a maid, a mere money-making machine. Each time he acted this way, he seemed oblivious to my suffering. Yet now, despite all this being a result of his actions, he came pleading for help as if he were the victim. His self-centered attitude was repelling. "Please help me. I'm begging you. What about getting married again? Let's start over properly this time." "I promise I'll never push you away again," Walter proposed desperately. I couldn't help but feel a mix of incredulity and annoyance. How could he think a simple plea for help could erase the years of neglect and misunderstanding? His desperation was evident, but so was the clarity of my decision not to fall back into the same pattern. I had moved on, and it was time for Walter to do the same. I chuckled bitterly at Walter's desperate suggestion. "Are you kidding me? All of this is the result of your actions. I've been trying to find peace in my way for a long time. I kept hoping you would face reality, and now you want me to start over with you, pretending none of that ever happened? Do you expect me to go back to those miserable days? That's never going to happen. I refuse to return to that life, no matter what." Emotions overwhelmed me, and tears started to flow. I couldn't tell if they were from anger or sadness. Walter remained silent on the other end, having nothing to say in response to my words. Unable to continue the conversation any longer, I simply said, "Goodbye," and hung up. Walter didn't call back, and to avoid hearing his voice ever again, I blocked his number. Later, I heard from mutual friends that Walter and his family were evicted from their home. Walter had tried to persuade my former in-laws to cover his rent, but they were furious, refusing his request and further upsetting the landlord. With no other options, they were forced to leave. Walter hasn't had much luck finding a full-time job and is now working part-time to make ends meet. Meanwhile, my former in-laws had to sell their house and are now crammed into a rundown apartment, all three of them together. Meanwhile, I've been deeply focused on my work, and my boss has even discussed a promotion with me. There's a possibility I might become the first female manager in our company, and I've been receiving admiration from both colleagues and juniors. Sometimes friends inquire if I'm thinking about getting married again. Honestly, after my past experiences, I have a rather negative view of marriage. The idea of dating or marrying again doesn't appeal to me right now, but life is long and there's no rush. Many people in this generation live their entire lives happily unmarried. What matters most to me is living a life without regrets and staying true to myself. With that in mind, I want to continue navigating life at my own pace, embracing whatever comes my way with strength and independence.
Has the funeral ended? Come back quickly. It's Eliza's birthday today, my dear daughter. Lori, my mother-in-law, informed me about Shelley's passing at only 5 years old on the day of her farewell. Strangely, she didn't attend her granddaughter's funeral and instead asked me to return for Eliza's birthday, her sister-in-law. I was bewildered by her behavior. Anger mingled with grief, prompting me to make a phone call. I'm Rel, a 33-year-old homemaker, married to Milo, who's 2 years older. We met through a friend 6 years ago and have been happily married ever since. We were blessed with our daughter, Shelley, soon after marriage. At 5 years old, she's at her most adorable age. It's heartwarming, yet her fate was tragically harsh. Shelley's health was fragile. 2 years ago, when she was 3, she started experiencing frequent fevers and colds. There was also swelling in her neck, which led us to rush to the hospital, thinking it might be mumps. After numerous tests and an agonizing wait, the doctors revealed the devastating diagnosis: malignant lymphoma, a type of childhood cancer. My world shattered, and I desperately pleaded, "There must be some mistake, doctor. Please tell me this isn't true." Despite the medical team's presence, I couldn't contain my tears. Immediate hospitalization was necessary. Even as we hurried home to gather essentials, I couldn't stop crying. Milo, my husband, cried alongside me but also urged, "We have to be strong. Shelley will pull through," his words filled with determination. We were briefed on the treatment plan, and I had to sign consent forms for procedures like blood transfusions and surgery. The grueling treatments commenced: endless IV trips, blood draws, transfusions, and chemotherapy. I quit my part-time job to be with Shelley at the hospital round the clock. Sometimes, Milo would take time off work to visit, insisting, "You need to rest too, Michelle, or you'll burn out." During his visits, I managed things at home or caught up on much-needed sleep to keep going. During the initial days at the hospital, Shelley cried often, but gradually she adjusted to the routine, crying less as time went on. The nurses praised her resilience. Shelley didn't shed a tear today during her injection, they commended. Despite the challenges of hair loss and weakness from chemotherapy, she never complained. Instead, she greeted us with smiles and happiness. Drawing became her solace. "Mom, Dad, look." Shelley proudly displayed a sketch of Milo and me in her notebook. "It's wonderful, Shelley," we praised. Her lively chatter in her hospital bed uplifted us. When her immune system weakened, she had to stay in a sterile room. But after a month, her condition improved, and she could finally come home for a brief respite. "I want to go back to preschool," Shelley announced one day. So we took her back after a long hiatus. Watching her play with her friends filled us with joy. Later, when my mom visited, seeing Shelley lively and cuddled in her arms made it hard to believe she was sick. "Mom, this smells like home," Shelley remarked, sniffing a towel that had been airing at home. Suddenly, she complained of a headache. "Let me check. Oh, you have a slight fever. Stay here. I'll make some soup." After tucking Shelley into bed and rushing to finish chores, the doorbell rang. Glancing at the monitor, I saw Lori. I instantly regretted not ignoring it. Lori's unexpected visit left me speechless. I wanted to ask, "What brings you here?" but held my tongue. Normally, having a caring mother-in-law would be a delight, but Lori, Milo's mom, was the last person I wanted to see. I imagined her retort would be, "Do I need a reason to visit my son's house?" If I dared to ask, "Do you have a hobby of harassing your daughter-in-law?" that might just confirm her suspicions. Since the beginning of our marriage, Lori had continuously harassed me, criticizing my lack of higher education and my appearance, mocking my height and supposed lack of cuteness. Her ability to wield hurtful words astounded me. In the past, my father-in-law acted as a buffer, reprimanding her behavior, which made things somewhat bearable. But after he passed away during our second year of marriage, Lori's mistreatment escalated. Left unchecked, she'd play petty tricks, like ordering steak for me despite my preferences or turning off the hot water while I showered. Milo's older sister, Eliza, a successful career woman married to a prosecutor, was the apple of Lori's eye. She often compared me unfavorably to Eliza, making snide remarks about our differences. Eliza has a son, Jace, in second grade, she'd boast. During Christmas visits, the contrast in Lori's treatment of Jace and Shelley was painfully evident. It seemed as though she couldn't see Shelley's charm simply because she didn't approve of her daughter-in-law. As I busily prepared soup, Lori barged in uninvited from next door. "Yes, Shelley has a fever," I responded tersely, hoping she'd take a hint to leave. But she persisted, commenting, "Such a delicate child. I wonder who she takes after. Certainly not our family. Your dad had cancer, didn't he?" "Yes, Lori, I've explained countless times. This illness isn't hereditary. While my dad did pass away from cancer when I was in high school, malignant lymphoma isn't genetic, except in certain virus-related cases. How many times must I repeat myself? Is she losing her memory?" In the end, Lori merely glanced at Shelley, made her spiteful remarks, and departed. I couldn't help but wonder if she was suffering from dementia. After checking on Shelley, exchanging a few sarcastic words, I left perplexed by Lori's purpose. Perhaps she was just bored. For a year, Shelley moved between hospital care and brief respites at home. After about a year and a half of intense treatment, she finally completed her therapy, and we welcomed her back home. She returned to preschool, and we even enjoyed a family trip to the aquarium, where she walked around with boundless energy. I never lost hope in Shelley's recovery. However, when she turned 5, a year after leaving the hospital, my worst fears materialized. She relapsed. The treatments resumed, including spinal injections, radiation therapy, and battles with pneumonia and high fevers. I did everything I could to ease her discomfort, even undergoing a bone marrow transplant for her. Sadly, my cells didn't take, and her condition deteriorated. Then, the doctor delivered the devastating news. There's nothing more we can do. Further treatment would only add to Shelley's suffering. It was a heartbreaking realization that time with her was limited. We made the decision to bring Shelley home so we could cherish our remaining time together as a family. We indulged her every wish, from participating in preschool activities to playing with her friends. Despite her own struggles, Shelley's bright smile never faded, bringing joy to everyone around her. Mom visited frequently, offering her support during these difficult days. I had promised myself not to cry in front of Shelley, but sometimes emotions overwhelmed me, and tears would escape. During those moments, Shelley would ask, "Mom, what's wrong? Are you feeling unwell?" Despite her own pain, she remained remarkably caring, showing concern for me. I pray for her happiness to last forever, for a miracle to save her, but sadly, my prayers went unanswered. Despite her outward appearance of health, Shelley's blood tests showed a worsening condition. She gradually lost the ability to walk. Yet we clung to hope, believing she would reach her 6th birthday. However, Shelley's health declined rapidly. She began to struggle with breathing, and the doctor warned us to prepare ourselves for the worst. Despite my efforts to remain composed, tears flowed uncontrollably. In a haze of grief, I whispered, "I love you," to Shelley. Despite her own weakness, she summoned the strength to utter her final words. As dawn broke and Shelley's condition worsened, the doctor tried desperately to save her. We pleaded for her to hold on, taking turns holding her in our arms, wishing for her to find peace. Shelley fought bravely, but eventually she slipped away from us. "Shelley, please respond. Open your eyes." I clung to her hand, which grew colder by the moment. There was no time to process my grief. I was immediately consumed by the whirlwind of funeral arrangements and preparations. Keeping busy seemed like the only way to hold on to my sanity. At the funeral home, I couldn't help but confront Lori, asking, "Are you not coming?" She simply replied, "The living matter more than the dead. Eliza is returning from abroad. It's her birthday today. You need to pick up the cake." Her callousness left me reeling, struggling to contain my anger. "At least bring a gift later. You must come, or I won't forgive you," I demanded. "As if you have the authority to forgive anyone," she retorted. Fed up with her excuses, I blocked Lori's number and reached out to someone for support. Despite the pain, the funeral was filled with people who came to bid farewell. Hospital staff, Shelley's preschool friends, and my own circle of friends. Tears flowed freely as we mourned Shelley's passing, a testament to the love she'd inspired. We adorned her coffin with her beloved sunflowers, and her friends tucked heartfelt letters inside. Milo stood strong as he represented our grieving family. Several hours later, Milo and I stood outside his parents' house. Despite Lori's desperate pleas for help as we entered, we ignored her and made our way to the living room. Inside, Eliza's family and a few relatives had gathered, their eyes fixed on Lori with disapproval. Eliza was the first to address us, offering her apologies. "I'm deeply sorry, Rel. We had no idea today was Shelley's funeral. After blocking Lori's calls, I had reached out to my sister-in-law, Eliza." Despite the ongoing tensions fueled by Lori's behavior and constant comparisons between Eliza and me, we shared a close bond, akin to real sisters. As an only child, I cherished Eliza's presence in my life, and her son Jace often played with Shelley even during her illness. Eliza frequently visited us, showing genuine concern. Unfortunately, this year, Eliza's work commitments abroad coincided with her birthday, overlapping with Shelley's funeral. While we were preoccupied with arrangements, we had entrusted Lori to inform her side of the family. However, Lori's misguided actions led her to inform relatives about a birthday celebration for Eliza's return, omitting any mention of Shelley's funeral. Upon her return, Eliza reached out to me again, only to discover that the burial had already taken place, leaving them waiting for our return. Amidst the somber atmosphere, Shelley's absence was keenly felt as Eliza and others mourned her loss amidst the awkward silence. Lori's words cut deep as she callously suggested, "You can always have another child." The most insensitive remark imaginable. In response, Eliza, with a fiery glare, grabbed the cake meant for her birthday and hurled it at Lori's face. "Cleanse that twisted personality of yours," she demanded, dragging Lori to the shower room and soaking her clothes in the process. Amidst the chaos, when questioned about Lori's actions, I weakly explained. Lori kept pressuring me to rush back for Eliza's birthday preparations. The relatives reacted with shock and disgust. After being drenched in the shower, Lori returned, despised by everyone present. Defending herself, she blurted out, "But it's Eliza's birthday party. She's returning after so long. Shelley was already sick, not expected to survive. Surely Eliza's birthday takes precedence, right?" However, her feeble excuse was met with fury. "A birthday party? Preposterous. And you called Rel for that? If Shelley meant anything to you, how could you disregard Milo's grief over losing his daughter? Why did you fail to attend your own granddaughter's funeral?" Eliza's righteous anger was unleashed. "No, but," Lori faltered, unable to conjure a suitable excuse. It was then that Jace, her grandson, spoke up softly. "Grandma, do you really love your grandchildren?" "Of course I do, Jace. I love you and Eliza's child," Lori replied defensively. But Jace's next words pierced through the tension. "What does that mean? So Shelley, your granddaughter, wasn't loved because she was sick, but Eliza's child is loved because she's healthy? Are you saying Shelley didn't matter?" These words echoed the sentiments of Lori's brother and sister-in-law, who shared their own grievances about Lori's past behavior. With no one coming to her defense, Lori's presence diminished, overshadowed by the weight of her actions. "We're leaving, Milo, Michelle. Let's talk another time," I announced, exchanging heartfelt hugs with my supportive relatives. Eliza followed suit, declaring her decision to sever ties with her mother. "Mom, we're done. You always favored successful people like Eliza, never caring for Shelley." Milo confronted his mother sadly. "It's not like that, Milo. You didn't meet my expectations like Eliza did. You only care about those who do as you want," Lori retorted, her words laden with regret. As I handed Lori something beside me, it was a drawing of her made by Shelley. In the picture, Lori was depicted with a genuine smile. "Despite everything, Shelley admired you. She saw kindness in you that I never did. She was a pure and loving child, even during her illness," I explained, watching as Lori broke down, clutching the drawing tightly. As we left Lori's house, ignoring her pleas, we knew our paths had diverged irreparably. Later, my uncle-in-law's family visited us, offering apologies for Lori's behavior. While Lori seemed remorseful, the damage was irreparable. As my aunt-in-law wisely observed, Lori had always been troublesome, and it was unlikely she would change. In the aftermath of the incident, other relatives also distanced themselves from Lori. Despite her loneliness and regrets, her past actions had alienated those around her. As the days passed and grief settled in, I found solace in connecting with other parents who had lost children to the same illness. Reaching out to Eliza and meeting her brought relief, and Milo and I found comfort in adopting a puppy, a symbol of renewal and hope in the wake of our loss. As I grappled with the pain of Shelley's absence, I found myself longing for the day when we would reunite in heaven. But until then, I vowed to live a life worthy of her memory, carrying her love and spirit with me always. Hi, I'm Mia. I'm 29 years old, and I recently went through a divorce from my husband Fred a few months ago. Fred and I first met in college, where we shared a few classes and often sat together. We hit it off and soon found ourselves falling in love. However, there was a challenge in our relationship. Fred's mother, Holly, she seemed to dislike me for some unknown reason and made efforts to come between Fred and me. I used to talk to Fred about how uncomfortable his mother's behavior made me, but he never took any action. He found it hard to stand up to her because she was all he had while growing up. So I decided to let it slide and endure her constant criticism. She loved finding fault in everything I did, even things she didn't know about. I suspected Fred was sharing details with her, which only fueled our arguments. After a lot of fighting, Fred agreed to stop sharing personal information about me with his mother. We dated for around 3 years before tying the knot. Despite Holly's attempts to sway Fred, our bond remained strong. We distanced ourselves from her for a while. During that period, both of us scored promotions at work. Although I earned slightly more, we divided our expenses 60/40, with me covering the larger share. While our relationship flourished, I felt the need to pursue a hobby for personal fulfillment. Design had always intrigued me, so I decided to explore graphic design, something I could do from home. Without Fred's knowledge, I invested in courses and equipment, keeping my project a secret. I preferred keeping my ventures private, as not all of them panned out. The only person I confided in was my best friend Jess. I've picked up a new interest. Another one of your hobbies you'll ditch soon. I hope not. I aim to make good money from it. Really? Finally getting paid for a hobby? Yes, actually, I'm delving into graphic design. Great choice. It's a lucrative field. I've taken some courses and want to start freelancing. I might start a business. Starting solo might not be my style. I was thinking of joining a firm. Nah, that's too routine for you. I have friends starting businesses. You could design their logos and websites. That sounds fantastic. The people Jess introduced me to were wealthy risk-takers willing to invest in a beginner like me. Despite my lack of experience, they appreciated my work and connected me with more clients. Gradually, my side hustle became a significant source of income, easing our financial strain. I started saving to surprise Fred with something special, but whenever I wanted to discuss it, he seemed distant. His behavior raised concerns, but he avoided discussing it. The first sign of trouble was when he confessed to spending all his earnings on investments soon after payday. We argued, but we managed to navigate through that month. I worked extra hours to make ends meet, hoping things would improve. But the following month, Fred repeated the same mistake, leaving me furious. How could he squander his money so recklessly? I lashed out in frustration, later regretting my harsh words. I hoped it would prompt him to be more responsible. Yet when it happened again the next month, I felt drained. Despite my efforts, Fred's financial habits persisted. My graphic design gig became our main source of income. But when Fred couldn't contribute for the third month in a row, I reached my breaking point. How could you let this happen again? Haven't you learned anything? I'm just trying to maximize returns, but I messed up. Messed up. Losing your entire paycheck isn't a small mistake. You've got your money though, right? We'll handle things as usual. No, I'm done. I won't cover for you this month. Figure out your own expenses. What? You can't do that. And you can't gamble away everything you earn. But here we are. So what? I'm supposed to go hungry and take public transport. We'll have food at home, but you'll have to use public transport since you can't pay for gas. So you want me to look poor? Taking public transport doesn't define your status. Stop acting entitled. If you wanted to drive, maybe you should have thought about your gambling habits. You're selfish and heartless. How could you do this to your husband? What about what you're doing to me? I've been working extra hours to cover for your losses. Can't you see things from my perspective? You have no perspective worth considering. I'm out. I can't deal with you right now. After Fred stormed off, I couldn't understand his behavior. It was then I started suspecting Holly's involvement. While Fred was away, I decided to investigate. Since he had logged into his bank account on my laptop and saved the password, it wasn't hard to access it. To my surprise, he had plenty of money in his account, and his transactions seemed normal. I was puzzled. Why was he hiding money from me? Why the lies? Feeling confused, I checked his messages for answers. The first person I noticed he had texted was his mom, discussing our recent argument. He told her I'd lashed out because he wouldn't give me money, and Holly responded with an "I told you so." It confirmed my suspicions that she was influencing him. She'd always harbored animosity toward me, but I didn't realize the extent of it until now. As I scrolled through their messages, I discovered more. Holly had bombarded Fred with texts about me, highlighting my supposed flaws like being money-driven and only with him for his wealth. Ironically, I was the main breadwinner in our household. It was clear she was getting to Fred. He started texting her about trivial things that annoyed him about me, and she only fueled his complaints. It explained why Fred was growing distant. Eventually, they plotted to cut me off financially. Initially, Fred resisted, but Holly's encouragement wore him down. 2 months ago, he went through with it. He informed Holly about my extra work hours 1 month and our subsequent argument the next, which only worsened things. I was devastated by what I discovered. Unsure of what to do, I sought solace at my best friend Jess's house. She's always been my go-to person in tough times, no matter the hour. Showing up unannounced at 11:30 p.m. understandably alarmed her. After letting me in and settling me with a glass of wine, she asked what had happened. "So spill the beans. What's got you so worked up?" "I've just uncovered some unsettling things, and I'm at a loss for what to do." "Oh, is this about Holly and Fred?" "Yeah. You remember how Fred's been throwing away his money on those sketchy investments for the past couple of months?" "Yeah, it was bizarre." "Did he do it again?" "Yes and no." "What do you mean?" "He's had his money all along but refused to give me any." "What? That makes no sense. You've been shouldering most of the household expenses, right?" "Exactly. That's what's so baffling about his behavior." "Is Holly pulling the strings in this?" "Of course. She's been texting him about my flaws for a while and even persuaded him to stop supporting me. And she's clueless about your income too." "But what about Fred? Shouldn't he realize how much you contribute?" "Apparently not. I'm not sure how to handle this. It's pretty obvious though, right? Cut off this support, then divorce him when he's down. Isn't that a bit harsh, Mia?" "He didn't think about that." "Why are you worried?" "You know what? You're exhausted. Sleep on it, and we'll talk more tomorrow." Jess was spot on. I was utterly drained, both mentally and physically. The events of the day had taken their toll, and all I craved was sleep. Luckily, it was the weekend the next day. Jess and I put on one of our favorite movies, and soon we drifted off. The following morning, we decided to escape from our troubles and indulge in a day of relaxation. We stayed in bed, binge-watching movies and shows, cooking delicious meals, and cherishing each other's company. Despite my efforts to push away thoughts of the previous day, they lingered. I knew I needed this time to process everything. However, that evening my phone rang. Seeing Holly's name on the caller ID made my heart race. Unsure whether to answer, Jess encouraged me to take the call. With trembling hands, I answered. "Hello, Holly. You're despicable." "Whoa, hold on. What's this about?" "You're just after my son's money, aren't you?" "Excuse me? Is that why you cut off his expenses?" "No, he's been squandering his money on those foolish investments. I can't keep supporting his reckless behavior." "Well, that was all a test." "A test? I wanted to show Fred that you're only with him for his wealth, and you proved my point. Don't you think you've crossed a line meddling in our marriage? Who are you to judge me when you're the one chasing wealth?" "Fine. I don't want my son's marriage to fail. What do you suggest we do to fix things?" "I want you and Fred to split everything 50-50ths. Everything." "Are you serious?" "Yes. Let's see how long you can handle it. I'll draft a contract for both of you. Once signed, you must stick to it." "Fine. If Fred agrees, we'll do it. I want a copy of that contract." "Agreed. We'll discuss further on Tuesday." I couldn't believe this was the state of my marriage, and anger surged within me. How dare Holly accuse me of being a gold digger, and how could Fred tolerate it? I'd supported him through everything, even his mistakes and lies. When I shared the call with Jess, she smiled, helping me see the silver lining. Splitting everything evenly meant Fred would have to shoulder his share of our major expenses. He had no idea about my side hustle, which I kept secret until it gained momentum. I wanted to surprise him with its success and buy him something extravagant. Knowing I had a solid backup plan brought me relief in that moment. Tuesday arrived sooner than expected. Jess joined me after we finished work, eager to witness the unfolding events. Upon our return home, we found Holly and Fred already there. Fred was preoccupied with his phone, while Holly sat with the lawyer, tweaking what seemed to be the contract on his laptop. Holly barely acknowledged me, but Fred looked visibly nervous. He tried to signal for us to talk privately in the kitchen, but I brushed him off. Instead, I approached Holly and requested to review the contract. The lawyer obliged, and as I suspected, it outlined an equal split of everything, with the added clause of no financial assistance between us. I agreed and signed the document. It didn't take long before Fred began facing challenges. At first, Fred and I kept our distance, both unwilling to engage with someone who seemed intent on my suffering. But when you share a living space, avoiding conversation is nearly impossible. Fred made efforts to bridge the gap between us, but I initially brushed him off. Eventually, his persistence wore me down, and I reluctantly started talking to him. "Can we please talk? This silent treatment is getting us nowhere." "What exactly do you want me to say, Fred?" "I don't know, but I miss us." "Do you? Then why agree to a contract dividing our finances?" "I wanted to see if you were truly invested in our relationship. Your mother has caused so many issues between us, yet you still believe her. Is this really the best solution?" "Don't speak ill of my mother. And what money do you think I need from you?" "Look, I don't want confrontation. I'm trying to mend things. There won't be any progress until that contract is gone. It's only been 2 weeks since we signed it. I have yet to see any proof that you're not just in it for the money." "You're impossible, you know that?" "Listen, if you're struggling financially, tell me. I'll help. But wouldn't that violate the contract? Besides, I don't want to be accused of breaking it." "Why are you making this so hard? You're the one who created this mess. Can't we just be civil?" "Fine." I could see Fred wrestling with conflicting influences, the beliefs instilled by Holly versus his original values. The Fred I married would never have made such foolish decisions that could harm me. Yet, here he was, obedient to every word from his mother, a decision he'd come to regret. Thankfully, I'd already paid off our major loans that month, leaving Fred in a bind the following month. With my shares settled, I enjoyed financial freedom. I indulged in splurges, treating myself and Jess to lavish dinners, fine wines, museum visits, and cozy cafes, documenting our adventures on social media. Despite inviting Fred to join us multiple times, he always declined due to his financial struggles. Meanwhile, my graphic design side hustle flourished, allowing me to reduce my hours at my day job and even contemplate quitting altogether. Fred's difficulties were evident, even in our groceries. His side of the pantry and fridge often remained empty. While part of me felt sympathy, I couldn't forget that he brought this upon himself. Later, Holly showed up at our doorstep. Jess and I had just returned, so her presence caught me off guard. "Hey Holly, what brings you here?" "Don't act innocent. I know what you've been up to, and I'm calling the cops." "Pardon me? What are you talking about?" "You've been robbing Fred, haven't you?" "Why on earth would I do that?" "Because you're seeking revenge. You're not happy about that contract he made you sign. My poor son has been struggling all month while you're out living it up on his dime. Firstly, your son doesn't have any money for me to steal. Yes, I despise the contract, but let's not forget who's truly responsible for it. You're the one who pressured us into signing it, and now your son is suffering because of it, you liar. I'll be dialing the police right now." "Go ahead. I haven't taken a penny from your son." "How do you have so much money then? Your job doesn't pay that much more than Fred's, and he mentioned you've cut back on hours." "I have another business on the side, a graphic design venture. I intended to surprise Fred with it until you filled his head with nonsense. You started a business without telling me. I plan to buy you a car with the money I earned. How much do you make from it?" "More than you think. You lied. I didn't do anything wrong. I was trying to do something nice, and you ruined it. Since you care so much about your son, maybe you should support him." I handed divorce papers to Fred, which I filed right after signing the contract and kept until now. Fred looked shocked, but I was indifferent. While Holly would normally rejoice at the sight of the papers, she seemed furious instead. I informed them I'd be moving out in 3 weeks and would continue to split the remaining loan payments, but that was all. Fred pleaded with me, but I reminded him it was his doing. It's been a few months since everything unfolded, and I can happily say I'm free from that toxic relationship. Holly tried to contest the divorce, but with our assets separated by the contract, there was little for Fred to gain. In fact, he ended up losing more money, struggling to keep up with the mortgage payments. We sold the house, and he moved back in with his mother. Meanwhile, my life has taken a positive turn. My business is thriving, and I've had the opportunity to collaborate with major brands. It's been a blissful and fulfilling time for me. I'm grateful I had something to rely on, or I might have ended up in Fred's situation. I hope he learns from this experience, but ultimately, it's not my concern. Hey guys, I'm Ellie. I want to share how I escaped a bad situation. My husband Luke has always been really close to his mom. At first, it was fine until I met Nora, my mother-in-law. She was awful to me, not just mean, but abusive. When Luke and I were dating, she did everything to break us up. But we stayed together and got married. Nora didn't like that at all. Even when we were happy together, she didn't stop. Things got worse when she and my father-in-law, Jay, stayed with us for a while. Nora kept trying to make me sick by putting allergens in my food. One time, she managed to give me soybean oil, and I ended up in the ICU, almost dying. That was the last straw for Luke. He used to defend his mom, but after that, he cut her off completely. It became clear to Luke how toxic Nora was when his dad, Jay, divorced her for trying to poison me. Nora claimed she didn't mean to, but no one believed her. We even got a restraining order against her, but our peace didn't last long. For 2 years, Luke and I enjoyed life without Nora around. Then I found out I was pregnant, and we were thrilled. But I worried Nora would find out and cause trouble. The restraining order had expired, and I didn't know how to keep her away. Luke used to be my support, helping me through my fears. But then he started suggesting that maybe we should forgive Nora and let her back into our lives. One day, he even sat me down and said, "Have you thought about what I said, Ellie? Maybe we should try to reconnect with Mom. It's been years. Think about our daughter." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Are you serious, Luke? Why would I want that? Your mother nearly killed me. How can you think she'll be safe around our child?" "She's my mom, Ellie. I think she's learned from her mistake. Let's give her a chance," Luke urged. "No way, Luke. I won't let Nora hurt me or our child again. I've had enough since the first incident. She's not coming back into our lives, especially not our daughters." "You already knew, Luke. My mind's made up." I was furious with Luke for even suggesting I invite his mom to my baby shower. His sudden interest in Nora only fueled my paranoia about her harming me and the baby. I couldn't believe he'd bring her up like that. Thankfully, it seemed like Luke dropped the issue and agreed to respect my decision. Turns out, I was dead wrong. Luke didn't drop it at all. He not only disregarded my decision, but made things worse behind my back. How did I find out? Well, his dad ended up calling me about it. A few days later, Jay called me and dropped a bombshell. "Ellie, sorry to spring this on you, but did you know your mother-in-law is coming to your baby shower?" "What?" "No, Jay, she's not invited. She's never welcomed back into my life." "Listen, Ellie, you need to know that Luke has invited Nora to your baby shower." I was stunned. I couldn't believe my husband had gone against my wishes like that. I was overwhelmed with confusion and anger. Feeling like I couldn't breathe properly, I said to Jay, "What are you saying, Jay? Luke invited his mom after I explicitly told him not to. He promised he wouldn't." "I know, Ellie. Luke's been in touch with his mom since the restraining order was lifted. I only found out yesterday. I tried to talk him out of it, but he's set on bringing Nora back into your lives." "Luke's talking to Nora again? How could he betray me like this? Is he out of his mind? I'll never forgive him for this." Jay reassured me, "I'll talk to him, Ellie. Nora won't harm you or the baby again. Luke's making a mistake, but I'll try to make him see reason." "I won't confront him about it, Jay. It won't change anything. I want to see if he actually goes through with inviting Nora to the baby shower. If he does, I'll divorce him." I was dead serious. The betrayal by my own husband was unbearable. I couldn't believe he'd willingly bring an abuser back into our lives. At that moment, I realized I couldn't stay with Luke if he went through with it. I'd risked my life once, but now I had my daughter to think about too. There was no way I'd subject myself or her to more abuse. Since Luke had already proven himself untrustworthy, talking to him seemed pointless. I kept what I knew from him. Jay and I kept in touch, keeping each other updated. I was preparing for divorce, consulting a lawyer and getting papers ready. I needed to be ready in case Luke actually brought Nora to the baby shower. The days leading up to it were stressful. Knowing Luke wasn't changing his mind left me in a bad state mentally. Luke was concerned about me, but I just brushed it off, claiming I wasn't feeling well. Being around him was tough. I felt betrayed. Yet, I never confronted him. I gave him chances to do right, but he didn't. So when the divorce papers arrived the day before the baby shower, I was ready to leave him for good. I was determined to show him the consequences of his actions. When Nora showed up at the baby shower with Luke, I was prepared, though seeing her still sent chills down my spine. I stepped away immediately, asking, "Why is she here, Luke? You promised she wouldn't be." "Oh, Ellie, lighten up. This is supposed to be a happy day. Let's not dwell on the past. The day was ruined the moment you brought your mother here against my wishes. How could you betray me like this, Luke? What choice did I have? You reacted badly when I asked, so I had to invite her secretly. So even after I said no, you sneaked behind my back to invite her? My safety means nothing to you, does it, Luke? Stop overreacting, Ellie. You're being unreasonable. My mom will be a great grandma, I'm sure. You believe your abusive mom will be a great grandma? Do you even hear yourself, Luke? And why are you defending her, Jay? It's been years. You should move on and accept her back. I'm tired of this. Your wife needs to grow up, Luke. Ellie, my son is right. It's time to move on. It's disappointing that you haven't matured, even with a baby on the way. My granddaughter needs a responsible parent like me. Luke, inviting me was the right thing. It seems you two need my guidance." I was stunned by Nora's words. She was actually suggesting she play a major role in raising my daughter. It was beyond belief. No sane parent would allow an abusive person like Nora anywhere near their child. I couldn't fathom Nora's audacity in thinking we'd agree to this. But what shocked me even more was Luke's lack of concern. He seemed to be on board with Nora's plan. I couldn't hold back my disbelief. "What are you saying, Luke?" "Nora, you can't seriously expect us to let you be a big part of our daughter's life. That's not happening," I interjected firmly. "Why not? She's my granddaughter, so I have a say in how she's raised, and you'll need someone to watch her," Nora replied confidently. "No way, Nora. You'll never babysit my daughter. Luke and I won't let someone like you, who's been abusive, anywhere near her." "Forget about that idea," I retorted. "Come on, Luke agrees with me. I'd be the best choice to babysit. Given your track record, maybe I should move in after the baby's born, right, Luke?" Nora added arrogantly. "Luke, you need to address this now. Do you really agree with what your mother is proposing? Are you seriously considering letting her take on a parental or caregiving role with our child?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I desperately hoped my husband wouldn't actually entertain such ideas. Jay had warned me about Luke's renewed contact with Nora, but I never imagined it had escalated to this. Even Jay didn't know the extent of their discussions. As the uncomfortable silence settled among the guests at the baby shower, I wished it was all just a nightmare. But reality hit hard when Luke casually responded, "I think you're being unfair to my mom, Ellie. She's a good mother and raised me well. I'm sure she'd make a great babysitter." "Are you forgetting she nearly killed me trying to prove my allergies were fake? How can you even consider her for such a role?" I shot back, incredulous. "Come on, Ellie, don't overreact. That was in the past. You need to let go and move on. Holding on to grudges won't do us any good. She's family, so you should forgive her," Luke replied dismissively. "I won't stand by while you force her presence on us. She's staying for the baby shower, and she'll be involved in our lives from now on." My husband's words hit me like a ton of bricks. He was insistent on having his abusive mother in our lives, despite the harm she caused. He seemed blind to the danger she posed, adamant that she'd play an active role in our daughter's life. But that was a line I refused to cross. I couldn't fathom having Nora, this deranged woman, in my life, let alone around my child. It was time for a difficult decision. All the preparations I'd made weren't for nothing, but it was hard to come to terms with. The realization that my marriage had reached this point was heartbreaking, but there was no turning back. I needed to leave this marriage, and I needed to do it now. So without another word to Luke, I calmly retreated to the study, ready to take the necessary steps to leave him. I headed to the study to retrieve the divorce papers I had prepared earlier. My hands trembled, and tears threatened to spill, but I held them back. There was no use wasting tears on a man who disregarded my feelings. So I composed myself and returned to the room where everyone was gathered for food and drinks. It felt awkward. Only Nora and Luke seemed at ease, sharing laughter and discussing our daughter's future plans. As I excused myself to the study, expecting Luke to follow, he remained behind with his mother. He likely assumed I was having another outburst and would eventually accept Nora. But he was mistaken. Returning downstairs with the papers in hand, I caught Jay's eye, who sat silently on the side. He seemed to understand what I was about to do and appeared saddened by it. Approaching my husband, who looked puzzled by the papers, and a smirking Nora, I spoke. You've made it clear that Nora is your priority. You've shown that my child and I would have to compromise our safety to accept Nora back into our lives. Today, you've made it evident that you've chosen Nora over us, Luke. No, Ellie, that's not what I meant. Please don't misinterpret my intentions. I'm trying to find a way for us all to get along. Mom is my family too, Ellie. You need to understand why I value her presence, Luke pleaded. You're determined to reintroduce this abusive woman into our lives. Well then, you've made your choice. You've chosen her over us, I replied firmly. What do you mean, Ellie? Here are the divorce papers, Luke. Sign them and return them to me. If you have any questions, speak to my lawyer. It's over. Luke and Nora were visibly shocked when I explained the significance of the papers. I handed them to Luke, arms crossed, as he hurriedly examined them. Yes, I had consulted a lawyer and prepared the papers in advance, ready to leave if Luke thought he could force his mother into our lives without consequence. His hands shook as he confirmed their contents, his expression a mix of disbelief and confusion. This can't be real, Ellie. Why would you do this? He stammered. I prepared the divorce papers because I knew what you were doing. I found out about Nora being invited to the baby shower from your dad. Dad, you told Ellie I invited Mom to the baby shower? Luke questioned. Yes, I did, Luke. Your mom boasted about her imminent return to your life, claiming the divorce was my loss since she hadn't lost her son after all. I had to tell Ellie because you disregarded her and even ignored my advice. I warned you, Luke. You should be ashamed, Jay rebuked. Luke began to grasp the gravity of his actions, though it hadn't fully sunk in yet. I could see the gears turning in his head as he glanced between me and the papers in his hands, visibly nervous. I wasn't the only one who noticed. Before Luke could respond, his mom grabbed his arm, interjecting, No, Luke, you did the right thing by bringing me back into your life. Don't listen to your father. Jake and Ellie want to keep us apart because they're jealous of our relationship. Oh, there's nothing left to be envious of, Nora. Jay isn't your husband anymore, and I won't be your son's wife either. Congratulations, Nora, you've achieved what you wanted. Your son is all yours now, I stated bitterly. No, Ellie, please, let's discuss this. You can't leave me like this. You can't spring divorce papers on me like this, Luke pleaded desperately. Oh, really, Luke? I can't surprise you with divorce papers, but you can surprise me by reconnecting with your mother behind my back. You comforted me while I worried about your mom, but all this time you were on her side. Luke started to panic. He hurriedly moved away from his mother and tried to reach for my hand, but I avoided his touch. It was unlike me to reject physical contact, but I couldn't bear to look at him, let alone let him touch me. I kept my distance, which only heightened his anxiety. You've misunderstood, Ellie. I just wanted us all to be a family again. I didn't mean to go behind your back, he pleaded. But you did, Luke. You had a chance today when I asked you to make Nora leave, but instead you called me stubborn and immature. You insisted I forgive her because she's family. Well, you don't have to worry about that anymore, Luke, because I'm leaving you. Nora and Jay will be your only family now, I declare firmly. I can't believe this, Ellie. After what my son did today, I'm deeply ashamed of him. This isn't how I raised him. His loyalty to his mother has clouded his judgment. I can't accept a son who can't discern right from wrong. Jay expressed, his disappointment evident. Dad, please don't say that. I still need you and Ellie in my life, Luke pleaded, his voice trembling with emotion. Oh God, this isn't what I wanted, Jay lamented. You wanted your mom back, Luke, and now you have her. You should be content. Don't worry, I won't keep your daughter from you. You'll have visitation rights as determined by the court, but I won't be your concern anymore. You can enjoy your life with your mom while I provide a safe environment for our daughter. I declared firmly. Luke broke down in tears as he realized the extent of my resolve. Nora stood in a corner, visibly nervous, her grand schemes crumbling before her eyes. She likely expected Luke to coerce me into accepting her back into our lives. But now, it was clear that her son valued me more than her, a fact that unsettled her deeply. Luke, growing increasingly desperate, implored, "Please, Ellie, let's calm down and talk this through. I know I made a mistake, but you need to understand why I did it. Please just give me a chance to explain. I've heard enough, Luke. You've made it clear how little you value my feelings and opinions and how little you care about me and our daughter. You should be grateful I'm allowing you to return to your beloved mother." "No, Ellie, you mean more to me than my mom. Please don't leave me," Luke pleaded desperately. "That's rich, Luke. If I meant more to you than your mother, you would have listened to me. There's no point trying to change my mind now. We're finished. You and your mother can leave since this party was organized by my family, who certainly didn't invite Nora. Take your mother and go, Luke." Luke broke down when I asked him to leave. He cried and begged me to reconsider. But when I remained resolute, he turned to Jay, pleading for his intervention. Meanwhile, Nora attempted to justify their actions, saying, "Come on, Luke, don't act so desperate. You don't need an immature wife like Ellie." "Enough, Mom. Just stop talking. This is all your fault. I never should have listened to you. I let you poison my mind, and now I'm about to lose my wife," Luke retorted. "Now, Luke, don't blame your mom for everything. You made the decision to invite her and defend her. There's no point trying to backtrack now. My decision stands," I reiterated firmly. "No, Ellie, please, don't do this to us." "Dad, please convince her to give me another chance," Luke pleaded. "You're on your own, son. You've made a big mistake, and you don't have any grounds to ask for forgiveness," Jay replied, his tone firm. Luke eventually realized the magnitude of his mistake. He hadn't anticipated my immediate departure once he brought his mom into our home. It was likely Nora who assured him that everything would be fine. However, it was ultimately my husband's misguided decision to prioritize his mother over our marriage. Unfortunately for both of them, their plan didn't pan out. I had mentally prepared myself for the worst, allowing me to maintain composure despite feeling sadness and disappointment. I remained strong for the sake of my child. After repeatedly urging Luke and Nora to leave, they finally departed. Alone with my thoughts, I experienced a minor breakdown. Fortunately, the presence of supportive friends and family helped me navigate through this challenging time. Although my emotions were mixed, the success of my baby shower provided some solace. Friends and loved ones rallied around me, offering their assistance in various ways. Later that evening, Luke returned, attempting to reconcile with me. However, I made it unequivocally clear that there was no path to reconciliation. Eventually, I proceeded with the divorce. I couldn't fathom remaining with someone who prioritized his abusive mother over the safety and well-being of our daughter and me. The divorce process concluded after our child was born, and despite initial resistance from Luke, it was finalized smoothly. Now, with my daughter at 9 months old, I have embraced my newfound freedom. Although Luke initially struggled with the divorce, his attempts to win me back proved futile. He severed ties with his mother, squarely placing blame for the dissolution of our marriage upon her shoulders. Nora, devastated by the fallout, never anticipated such a turn of events. I'm relieved to report that she has had no contact with my daughter, thanks to Luke's efforts to keep her away in hopes of reconciliation. Occasionally, I receive updates from Jay about Luke's struggles, and while I empathize with his situation, I'm grateful to have escaped a marriage where my boundaries were repeatedly tested and disregarded. In the end, Luke's actions backfired, resulting in the unraveling of his life.